Hello, my name is Chiemena Osuagwu, and my presentation is focused on Ranipet, India, and the environmental and health impacts of the tannery industry. Brief purpose and objective. There are numerous amounts of environmental hazards within the leather industry due to tanneries. One major toxin associated with tanning is chromium. In Ranipet, India, there is a huge tanning industry and as such, major chromium exposure to not only the environment but those who live, work, and play in this small town. Before we begin, here is a brief overview of my presentation and what will be spoken on. I have broken it down into the context, the problem, the incident, the impact, and the solution. We will talk about the tannery industry, what it is, the global anthropogenic activities that are associated with the tannery industry, the impact on India's environment as well as globally, and the relationship between the environment and human exposure. Leather production is one of the most important, booming million-dollar industries in the world. As you can see in Figure 1, the top 11 countries that export the most leather in the world are Italy, United States, Brazil, China, Germany, India, Argentina, France, Spain, and Austria. India specifically has increasingly been exporting leather and leather products annually. In fiscal year 19 alone, India had a leather export value of over 350 billion Indian rupees. Now, before leather can become what you know it as, it must go through the process of tanning. Tanning is the process in which skin and hides of animals are processed to produce leather by altering the protein structure of the skin and hide. Originally, tanning used tannin, an acidic chemical compound, hence the name, found in oaken bark. However, during the Industrial Revolution in 1858, chromium was adopted as the most efficient and effective tanning agent. It's cheaper than other types of tanning, such as vegetable tanning, because it processes faster, like around 2 days, compared to a whole year with vegetable tanning. During chrome tanning, the skin and hide is placed in acidic salts and soaked in a chrome-based solution. However, the process is less natural and must be thoroughly managed and regulated. Chromium is considered a top toxic threat. In fact, it is in the top 3 toxic threats to the world's population, with an estimated global impact of about 13 to 17 million people. That is because chromium use is a major problem, both within the chrome processing plants that supply chrome salts to the tanneries and at tannery complexes that do not have adequate wastewater control and treatment. For example, South Asia is home to about 62 tannery sites, which impact about 1,100,000 people. Central America has 3 sites and impacts about 300,000 people. South America has 11 sites and impacts about 200,000 people. And Africa has 9 sites and impacts about 100,000 people. Based on the numbers, 75% of chromium sites are located in South Asia, and of those, nearly 33% are associated with tannery operations. In fact, almost half of the world's tanning and leather industries are located in low and middle income countries. In the case of Ranipet, a medium-sized community located in the state of Tamil Nadu, about 100 miles away from Chennai, India's 4th largest urban city, chromium waste is a huge issue. Ranipet is home to a little over 50,000 people. It has a large concentration of tanneries that process hides and skins to produce leather. There are a number of large and medium-scale leather factories making both finished leather and leather articles or export. And then there are other small-scale factories in Ranipet that mainly engage in chemical and tool making. These industries are the major lifeline for the town and provide many jobs. Not surprising, as India produces nearly 1.4 billion square feet of leather per year. Sadly, since there isn't much regulation and management of the toxic waste that come with these tanneries in developing countries, tanning is one of the biggest sources of chromium releases into the environment. A prime example of this was the Tamil Nadu Chromates and Chemicals Limited factory. The factory opened in 1976 and its main products were sodium bichromate crystals and chromium sulfate tanning powder, obviously used locally in the leather tanning process. The chromium waste generated was approximately 1,600,000 metric tons. The waste was then dumped in an open area near the factory, which has been leaching and polluting the environment and groundwater system ever since. Due to this pollution, residents and workers alike around the factory were facing many problems, both environmental and physical health, due to the contamination. And as a result, the factory closed in 1996. As a result, a group of scientists identified the polluted zones in regard to their lateral and vertical extent and the composition of the water. In the investigation, 25 samples were collected from bore wells, dug wells, and surface water sources in 1-liter polythene water bottles as per the standard procedure, as you can see on the location map of well inventory here. Then, the observation results were analyzed and tabulated as shown here. At the time of collection, the details regarding well inventory lithology and other information were noted. All these samples were analyzed in the laboratory for pH, total, and hexavalent chromium. Physical-chemical characteristics of the drinking water standards of WHO and ISI are tabulated in the table adjacent to show comparison. The results concluded high dangerous levels in the surrounding areas of the closed factory. In another study, scientists set out to find the contamination levels of surface water bodies due to industrial effluents. The results listed on this slide revealed that the surface water in the area is highly contaminated, showing very high concentrations of some heavy and toxic metals. The concentration levels of these metals are much more than the permissible limits in surface water and are a health hazard, especially for people working in the tannery industry. These are just small examples of the effects of chromium in the environment. On the left, a collection of foam which is laced with highly toxic and acidic chemicals is created as the water is discharged onto local fields. On the right, the water is laced with toxic chemicals and is highly acidic, giving it a very distinct color. Another example are huge smoke that come from chimneys of these leather tannery factories, which cause severe air effect within the city. Overall, globally 60 million people are at risk of exposure to chromium. Of these, 3 million people are estimated to be burdened with disease. The common route for chromium exposure is usually through ingestion, inhalation, and dermal contact. Of these, the possible health impacts of chromium include gastrointestinal, respiratory, developmental, reproductive, and immunological. And here are a few examples of what that looks like in cities in India. For those who work in the tanneries, the exposure to chromium comes from many sources. This includes discharge in the wastewater into the rivers that are a source of drinking, fishery, and vegetation near villages. Effluents from these tanneries can leach into the soil and into the crops, and workers can also be exposed via inhalation. A study on chromium exposure in the blood was conducted and was found to have concluded that tannery workers and nearby dwellers had higher levels of chromium in their blood compared to those in the controlled setting, which were those who were outside of the city or were in hospital settings. Another study found higher prevalence of health complaints among inhabitants from chromium exposure versus those without. These included pain in the abdomen, reduced appetite, diarrhea, cardiovascular issues, gastrointestinal issues, and dermal issues. As you can see, those who were exposed to chromium had higher prevalence of health complaints versus those who were not. Fortunately, steps are being taken to remediate the situation. Organizations such as Blacksmith have been in dialogue with the State Pollution Control Board in India about cost-effective remediation options. Studies have also suggested that the waste can be relocated to a more secure location, and uses of technology to reduce the groundwater and contaminated soil to a more stable chromium. Overall, what is necessary and needed is better waste management and monitoring. This concludes my environmental health presentation of Ranipet, India on the exposure of chromium via tannery factories. And I would like to thank you all for listening to my presentation. Thank you.